Without further ado, I'd like to introduce McGraw-Hill Education Consultant, Terry Stiegelman-Johnson. Terry is an experienced educator and math specialist. She has worked for the Milwaukee Public School District and the Dallas Independent School District. Terry is now a national mathematics consultant for McGraw-Hill Education, providing in-services, trainings, and presentations across the country. Terry, let's get started.
All right, so welcome and thank you for attending. As you know, the purpose of this webinar is to share information about the new Common Core Mathematics Assessment. During our time together, we're going to address three important questions. The first question we're going to address is, who's developing a new Common Core assessment? Secondly, we'll address the question, what types of items will appear on the assessment? And finally, we'll answer the question, how can I prepare my students? Before we dive into this information, I'd like to learn a little about you and your background. Please respond to the first poll, and after everyone has selected a role, we'll take a look at the results. So go ahead and put the poll up for you. So the first poll, we'd like to know a little bit more about you. What best describes your role? Teacher, principal, district curriculum administrator, district trainer, or other? Okay, looks like we have just about everyone completed, so go ahead and close the poll. All right, so we have about 75% of you joining us today are teachers, so looks like we do have a lot of teachers joining us today. All right, so the next one, we're actually going to do one more poll, just one more question. Tell us how much you already know about the Common Core assessment. Okay, looks like we have just about everyone again. All right, so it looks like a lot of you have already started your research on the Common Core assessments, and some of you have quite a bit of experience. So it's going to be helpful as we look through the information this afternoon. So let's begin by orienting ourselves with a brief overview. Several groups are developing the Common Core assessment. There are two state-led assessment consortia that have received government funding to develop the Common Core assessment program. I'm sure you've heard of both Smarter Balanced, SBAC, which is the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Most people refer to it as Smarter Balanced at this point, and Parcc, the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. Parcc is one of the largest groups involved in this effort. These groups have been developing comprehensive assessment systems designed to measure the full range of the Common Core state standards. For grades 3 through 8 in high school, these assessments are designed to measure the depth and breadth of the Common Core state standards and college and career readiness. There will be summative, end-of-year, and end-of-course assessments, as well as optional interim assessments. The assessments will begin to be administered during the 2014-2015 school year. Most states will be using one of the tests developed by Smarter Balanced or Parcc, but it's important to note that all developers are moving toward the same type of test. And even if your district is using a different vendor for the test development, this webinar should be helpful in making the transition to the new test-taking style. So we're going to take a, yes.
I think the poll is still up on the screen. On my computer.
Oops, okay.
Sorry about that. There we go.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. All right, so just to review about the Common Core assessments, we were just talking about the several groups. Parcc really being one of the largest, looking at the comprehensive assessment systems, and then if you look at the tiles across the bottom, focusing on the 3rd through 8th grade with high school, focusing on the depth and breadth of the Common Core, focusing on the college and career readiness, both summative and end-of-year assessments, with that optional interim assessments being first administered during the 2014-2015 school year. The Partnership for Assessment and Readiness for College and Careers, or Parcc, exists to determine whether students are on track to be college and career ready, assess the full range of Common Core state standards, including the standards that are difficult to measure the full range of student performance, including the performance of high and low performing students, provide data during the academic year to inform instruction, interventions, and professional development, provide data for accountability, including measures of growth, and to incorporate innovative approaches throughout the assessment system. To address these purposes, the Parcc assessment system will utilize technology. I'm sure many of you are already aware of this. The assessments will be administered online and will be using technology to enhance and score questions and to provide reports and resources. There will be two summative required assessment components, a performance-based assessment and an end-of-year end-of-course assessment. These assessments will have a mix of item types, what we'll look at shortly. A combination of automated and human scoring will be used. The performance-based assessment will focus on applying skills, concepts, and understandings to solve multi-step problems that require abstract reasoning, precision, perseverance, and strategic use of tools. And I'm sure many of you are familiar that those pieces that I just listed, a lot of those are those 8 standards for mathematical practice that you're now focusing on. The end-of-year or end-of-course for high school assessment will call on students to demonstrate mathematical fluency and to demonstrate further conceptual understanding of the grade or course content, and that's outlined in the Parcc model content frameworks. There will also be 2 non-summative optional assessment components designed to generate timely information for informing instruction, interventions, and professional development. A diagnostic assessment, which will provide an indication of student skills and knowledge so that instruction, support, and professional development can be tailored to meet student needs. And a mid-year assessment, which will include performance-based items and tasks with an emphasis on harder-to-measure standards. The 2 summative assessments will be given during the final weeks of the school year. The 2 optional assessments are designed to be given at the beginning of the school year and at the middle of the year. Here are the current member states for the Parcc Consortium. There are governing states, participating states, and advisory states. The governing states have decision-making authority, while the participatory advisory states consult on test design and policy but don't have any decision-making authority. The participatory advisory states take part in pilot and field testing. Florida is the procurement state or fiscal agent for Parcc. The Parcc Consortium has developed an assessment program that includes summative assessments and additional assessments, tools, and resources. So for Parcc summative assessments, they're going to utilize technology, which includes the use of technology for both administering and scoring the assessments, as well as the delivery of reports and resources. It also includes 2 components, both given during the final weeks of the school year, a performance-based assessment and an end-of-year assessment. It uses both electronic or automated and human scoring. This is going to allow them to provide results within 2 weeks of the test administration. And the use of computerized assessments that are not adaptive, meaning they do not adapt to the test taker's ability level. So Parcc's other assessments, resources, and tools include optional interim assessments, the formative items or tasks for classroom use, the professional development and instructional resources, an optional diagnostic and mid-year assessment, and an optional K-2 formative performance task. Now looking at the timeline for the development and the release of the Parcc assessment. In 2012, Parcc began writing items and performance tasks, and they released the Model Content Framework for Mathematics. In the spring of 2013, Parcc conducted some small-scale research studies. Currently, field tests are being conducted, and items and tasks are now being reviewed. Sample items are also being released and can be found online at www.parconline.org. There you'll also find samples of the summative assessment items for grades 3 through 12. In the spring, Parcc's going to be conducting field tests. Then in the summer and fall of 2014, the Parcc will release a diagnostic assessment. Finally, in the spring of 2015, Parcc performance-based and end-of-year assessments will be ready for administration during the last few weeks of the school year. Now that we've taken a look at the assessment program, now we're going to identify the types of items that your students are going to encounter. The new Common Core Math assessments are going to include the following types of items: select response items, constructed response items, performance tasks, and technology-enhanced items. We're going to look at the examples of each of these item types. As we do, consider the depth of conceptual understanding and the procedural fluency that's now going to be required by your students to successfully answer these questions and complete the tasks. Also, I'm going to ask you to reflect on the kind of instructional support and activities that you can provide as a teacher to your students to help them prepare for these assessments. So we're going to begin first by looking at an example of a traditional multiple choice. But the first thing to notice is the fact that Common Core and Parcc refer to this as selected response. So this is what everyone has known as multiple choice for years, but is now referred to as selected response. So you're going to consider this multiple choice question that asks a student to identify the statement that is not true. This is a pretty straightforward question, requires recall rather than the higher order of thinking or depth of knowledge to answer. Here, the question has now been revised to illustrate the type of the selected response items that are going to be included in the Common Core assessments. So the thing I want you to notice here is that now the students must read each statement and determine if it is always true or sometimes true. So asking the students to determine to the extent to which each statement is true requires them to consider all of the cases in which each might not be true. So by answering this question correctly, the students are now demonstrating a fuller and deeper understanding of the positive and negative integers. I also want you to notice that the students are asked to provide an answer for each option, rather than being asked to select just one answer choice. So you're going to see that this item type differs significantly from the multiple choice questions that students have traditionally been asked to respond to. So therefore, students should now be exposed to these types of questions before taking the Common Core assessment. So that frequent exposure to these types of questions is really going to help increase the comfort level of your students with this type of questioning and thinking. So the next type we're going to take a look at is the constructed response items, or tasks. Now these are going to require your students to use greater analytical thinking skills and deeper reasoning than most selected response items. So the new assessments are going to include a variety of these types of items. They're going to ask your students not just to solve a problem, but also to construct a logical response describing how they solved it. So not just to do it, but to show really how they've done that. So traditionally, students would be asked to simply state how much the group spent on tickets for this particular problem that we're looking at now. In this example of a Common Core constructed response item, the students are also now asked to model the total amount spent with an expression and describe how applying the distributive property makes it easier to find the total amount spent. So now we're adding these two extra steps, and that's really requiring the students to understand and demonstrate how they arrive at the correct answer. So they're not simply anymore just asked to provide an answer. They're now asked to state the word problem as an expression and apply the mathematical property that is most helpful in solving the problem. So this conscious approach to problem solving is characteristic of the Common Core, and it's going to be required on those new Common Core assessments. So now looking at the extended response. Looking at the Glencoe Math extended response tests helps students prepare for the new Common Core constructed response items. So we just looked at that constructed response. Now we're looking at some of the tools that you have to get your students ready. the extended response test that you're looking at right now is from Glencoe Math Course 1, generally taught in 6th grade, for Chapter 5, which is integers and the coordinate plane. So we're going to take a moment to read the instructions in bold. You guys can all read. I'll let you just read it from your screen. So the key thing that I want you to notice here is the phrase, demonstrate your understanding. So this is a key component of the Common Core, and this is going to resonate throughout the Common Core assessment items. So you're going to be able to help your students prepare for the type of questioning and thinking that's going to be required of them by asking them to show their work and justify their answers. Now, we realize that you guys are, have already been doing this for years, but again, this is something that's really going to be focused on those Common Core assessments. So encouraging the students to ensure the solutions in more than one way, or asking them to investigate beyond the requirements of a problem, is now going to promote the type of critical thinking and problem-solving skills that they're going to see and be evaluated on the Common Core assessment. So you're going to notice that question 2, like question 1, has multiple parts. In part D, students are asked to describe 3 possible locations given by an ordered pair. This question does not ask for an exact answer. Instead, it's actually asking your students to calculate 3 possibilities based on mathematical reasoning. The questions that have multiple correct answers are going to be included on the Common Core assessment. So to prepare the students, have them practice responding to problems that have more than one correct answer. So before moving on, I'd also like to point out the use of number line coordinates in question 2. As you're going to see later on, students will be required to interact with charts and graphs on the Common Core assessments. Therefore, it's important to teach your students how to visually manipulate and represent the data on charts and graphs. So the next piece we're going to take a look at are the performance tasks. The performance tasks are another type of item that's going to appear on the Common Core assessments, and these are going to be used to measure a student's ability to integrate their knowledge and skills across multiple standards, their depth of understanding, their research skills, and also it's going to evaluate how well they can analyze complex problems which cannot be adequately accessed with the selected response or constructed response items that we just took a look at. Most of the performance tasks that you're going to see involve the following 3 main components. So you're going to see the stimulus, such as graphs, tables, maps, figures, models, or spreadsheets. Then the information processing, which includes utilizing tools and completing tasks. And then finally, the product, or performance, which could include graphical displays, models, mathematical proofs, or spreadsheets. So now we're going to walk through a sample performance task. Clinical math includes performance tasks similar to those that the students are going to be encountering on the Common Core assessment. This performance task, the cross-country tryouts that you're looking at right now, is from Course 1, again, 6th grade, Chapter 6, Expressions. Note that there are 3 parts to the task. The stimulus, which in this case is the diagram of the football field. Information processing, which includes writing the expression to represent the perimeter of the field and determine the actual number of the yards that each athlete must run in the tryouts, and then the product, which is the speed at which they must run each lap if they are to qualify for the team. The scoring rubrics are included with each of these performance tasks. So by responding to these types of performance tasks, the students are now preparing to demonstrate their knowledge on those Common Core assessments when they're going to see these similar types of performance tasks. So just to give you another example of a performance task, this one is planetary play from Course 3, which is from 8th grade, Chapter 1, Real Numbers. So now in this example, the stimulus is the table at the top with the information about the planet's distances from the sun. The students are going to need to be able to process the information from the table to answer the questions in parts A through C. And finally, in part D, the students are then going to write a proportion that's going to be used to create a model showing the planet's relative distance from the sun. So this is going to create the end product, which is going to be a drawing of the model. And here you're going to see the rubric for this particular performance task. So now we're going to turn our attention to the technology-enhanced questions that are going to appear on the Common Core assessments. These new assessments are specifically designed to harness the power of the technology to facilitate the assessment of student understanding of math concepts, procedures, and their problem-solving skills. So with these technology-enhanced items that they're going to see, the students may create equations, they may graph functions, they may draw lines of symmetry, or create graphs, among other technology-based tasks. The students will also need to apply conceptual understanding and procedural fluency and comfortably and competently use the technology to interact with the question elements and to input their responses. So there may be components of some extended response items and performance tasks that will include some of these technology-enhanced tools. So these are definitely not necessarily a standalone piece. Glencoe Math's new tech-enhanced questions are specifically designed to harness the power of the technology to facilitate the assessment of the student understanding of the math concepts, procedures, and problem-solving skills, as we've just discussed. So for the question that you're looking at right now, students are asked to make a circle graph to display the given data. So you're going to see the first with the conventional irrigation, and then showing each part. But again, using the technology pieces to fill in the information. So we're going to do two more examples of the technology-enhanced questions that you're going to see in the Glencoe Math e-assessment. For question 8 that you're looking at right now, the students are going to use the given data provided in the table on the left to create a line on the graph. For question 14, the students are going to use the protractor that's provided for them to measure a given angle. To locate the technology-enhanced questions within Glencoe Math, within the e-assessment, you can open the folder that's called Assessment Items Technology Enhanced under Question Sets. So there you're going to find the question sets for chapters that currently have tech-enhanced questions. So once again, this is going to give the students the opportunity to kind of practice how they're going to play as they're getting ready for the assessments. In addition to the opportunities within the assessment piece, Glencoe Math's virtual manipulatives also prepare students for technology-enhanced test items by familiarizing them with the process of manipulating the objects on the screen. A couple other things to talk about. For those of you who maybe have worked with Geometry Sketchpad, or for those of you who maybe are not familiar with it, McGraw-Hill Education's Geometry Sketchpad is the world's leading software for teaching mathematics. Now, Glencoe Math has embedded the Geometry Sketchpad activities within the relevant lessons. So this is now giving students a tangible, visible way to learn the concepts and increase the engagement, understanding, as well as the achievement. In this example that you see here, the students are going to use the Ready tool to construct an angle. First, they measure the angle, and then they drag the points, B and C, all the while making observations about how the measure of the angle changes. So this type of technology-rich activity is really going to help prepare your students to answer those technology-enhanced questions that we just talked about that they're going to see on the Common Core Math assessment. So now when considering how to prepare your students for the Common Core assessment, it's important to keep in mind some of the ways in which the new assessments are different from those traditional high-stakes assessments that your students have seen in the past. So some of the item types are new and unique compared to those traditional tests. So this is including those technology-enhanced questions that we talked a little bit about and showed you a couple of examples of. And also new is going to be the items that have multiple correct answers. A lot of our students at this point are used to just looking for that one right answer. So it is really going to be a change in thought process for them as well to look for those multiple correct answers. And now for some items, how you solve the actual problem may be more important than the answer itself. So it's important to remind the students to respond and provide the rationale even if they are not sure of their answer. So that work is still going to help them even if they are struggling with their answer. So next, to look at how we can help the students prepare for those new assessments and the digital test environment. So there's a few things that we can encourage them to do. Take the practice tests, preferably on a computer when the opportunity allows, under those time constraints, because that's what they're going to face when they take the actual test. There are currently task prototypes and new sample items at the parconline.com, and the practice tests are going to help the students experience taking that test online and will expose them to the new item types. As part of this, the students should also be reminded to read directions carefully. I'm sure a lot of you do this all the time and feel like a broken record at some point, but reminded to read those directions carefully because a lot of those question types are going to be new to the students. They should also look at all the answer choices and eliminate any of the wrong answers, keeping in mind that more than one answer may actually be correct, and that now they may frequently need to select all of the correct answers. So now, if you don't mind, I'd like to take some time for you to share any techniques that you may already be using in your classroom or you're planning to use to help your students to prepare for the Common Core assessment. So we're going to ask you to please type your responses into the questions area. Elise is going to check these, and then we're going to be able to share these with the group.
Okay, we've got one coming in here from Shelley. Shelley says that you can help students prepare by administering your tests online via e-assessment.
That's a great thing. And for those of you who have not had access to e-assessment yet, at the end of the webinar, we're going to make sure that you have all the resources that you need so you can check out e-assessment. But e-assessment is a great way to get your students practicing exactly how they are going to be taking these high-stakes tests. Anything else, Elise?
Lisa says, have students practice responding to test items that have more than one correct answer?
Because that's definitely something that they're not necessarily used to. It's a great thing to have them practice.
Okay, that looks like everyone.
Okay. And so before we begin to wrap up, I just want to give you the opportunity to ask any additional questions that you may have. Elise has been collecting any questions that have come up throughout the course of the webinar, but if you want to take a second right now to use the chat feature to ask any additional questions. And then Elise, if you have any of those, then to share with me.
We did have one question. The question was, where can we find the tech-enhanced questions? And you mentioned this on an earlier slide, and I think I captured it here. There's a folder, right, Terry?
Yes, under the chapters that have them. So in e-assessment right now, when you go into the question sets in the upper left, for the chapters that have them, there will be a separate folder that says tech-enhanced questions. So they appear right along with the rest of your questions in your question set.
Okay, and we're also getting questions about how you can receive copies of the slides of this presentation, and we will send those out to you after the presentation.
Okay, good. All right, so let's conclude with a summary. Parcc is developing that new Common Core math assessment. So this assessment is going to contain those selected response items, which most of us know as multiple choice, the constructed response items, performance tasks, and then those technology-enhanced items. And we were able to take a look at all 4 of those throughout the course of the webinar. It's also going to provide optional interim assessments, and the assessments from Parcc are going to be ready for the 2014-2015 school year. So now you can help prepare your students for these new assessments through some instructional activities and continuous assessment that focuses on that conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and those mathematical practices using a wide variety of activities, questions, and tasks. So to further help prepare your students, Glencoe Math is going to provide those technology-enhanced items that we talked about through that e-assessment tool, the opportunity for those extended response tests, as well as the performance tasks. Now, we want to thank you for attending this webinar this afternoon. As you exit, you're going to see a survey appear on your screen for you to complete. We really appreciate you taking just a couple minutes to complete that survey for us. Additionally, you're going to receive a follow-up email. That email will contain a recording of today's session. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email at the address on the screen, webinars@mheducation.com, and I'll leave the screen up. And you can also take a tour and sign up for a sample to try Glencoe Math at www.mheonline.com/Glencoe Math. So I'd like to thank you again for your time, and I hope that everyone has a nice evening.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.